And here we have a club hammer. It's 1.8 kg head, or 4 pounds. That's not the problem, it's in pretty good shape. However, this handle has been replaced with a piece of scrap wood. As you can see, that is not held up very well at all. It's also missing any sort of wedge to hold it in tightly. So to repair this, we will be fitting a new handle. There we go. 20 Rand, South African, in June or July of 2020. Clearly a bit undervalued, the currency. And a wedge for probably about another US dollars worth at 17 to 1. First step is to remove the old handle. You can start by cutting it off here with a wood saw, with a power or hand saw, or you can just drive it out. In this case, because there's no wedges, we don't need to remove those first. I'm going to use an aluminium bar, no real reason, just except that it's handy, and a hammer to pound it out. And just like that, it's out. Looking at the head, you can see that it's not in bad condition. However, there are some bits of metal that could probably be smoothed off with a file, so we'll file that off in a second. And the wooden handle, the new wooden handle at least, it doesn't quite fit in all the way, no matter which way you put it. Basically it gets a bit narrow in the middle, so we'll have to shave this down, or sand it down, or file it down, or rasp it down. In this case I'll probably use a belt sander, as that'll be quicker and noisier for the neighbors. Good fun for everybody. There we go. Okay, and let's use the belt sander. Upside down and can be locked in position. Quick test fit. Almost, but not quite. So we just repeat. Here we can see a knot, which is clearly not ideal, but for the price and the intended use of this hammer, it'll be fine. Just a bit more. And that is starting to look better. Almost there. And about there is hand tight, so giving this thing a couple of good taps on the back of the handle should sort it out. Okay, and some couple of good taps, just a piece of wood. It's not really that heavy, but it's a decent sized log. Take a look. Wow, look at that. Came through nicely here. So you don't have to put it on the ground and hammer it here or hit this with something metal, just like that. You can see here a little bit of, just over there, near my thumbnail, is a sliver of wood being scraped up. Other than that, pretty good fit all around, so quite happy with that. Remember, this side gets a wedge in, so it'll be split open, the wood will open up. I think I'll just drive a little bit more. Yeah, it's not moving anymore now, so I think that's in very nicely. The other thing that we can do, which is more cosmetic, is to refinish this handle. You can see it's quite rough and not particularly smooth. And after sanding it, we can then use linseed oil on it, or boiled linseed oil if you prefer, and that will give it a nice finish. It actually feels quite good in the hand, right about there. So quite happy with that already. Let's then take it out and finish it first, and then we can refit it with a wedge. So take it out, just bear in mind the piece of wood I'm using is a lot softer than the handle, so I'm not very worried about messing up the head. Look at that, right out. And you can see where the head has caught over there, so we can just remove that with the sander. Either in fact, an orbital sander would probably be slightly easier for this because it's very little ready to come off. Otherwise a file or a rasp, or even sandpaper by hand if you've got the time. Anyway, let's get this sanded nicely. And this is 120 grit, so it's quite a fine grain, and it's been worn a bit, so it's not taking very much wood off at all. So I'll probably just finish this up with the orbital sander now. Okay, this time using the orbital sander, but with 80 grit sandpaper. Let's just smooth it off a bit more, finish it off. Well, that's a lot smoother. And while it's not obvious, this 80 grit's taken a hell of a lot of sanding abuse, and it's probably more like a 120 or finer. Let's get some more paper, maybe a 220, and finish it off. Here we go with the 220. Really just removing some of the scratches. A bit of a groove here, so kind of smooth that off a little bit, or a little bit more I should say. So on the other side. And your fingers are very, very good at figuring out spots that you missed, even if your eyes can't see them, for sawdust or whatever other reason. Okay, I think I'm pretty happy with that. Oh, wait, maybe a touch more over there. Again, the finger's fine, but the eyes don't see. And there we go. And while completely unnecessary from a functional point of view, the rust here can be removed very easily on a wire wheel, and I know people love to see a wire wheel in action, so let's get polishing. Certainly shiny enough for my purposes. Before fitting the handle, I did notice that inside the hole in the head there's quite a bit of, well, not quite a bit of rust, there's a bit of surface rust. So we'll just use a bit of a plastic green scourer and take that out of there. If only for peace of mind, if nothing else. And also maybe a handy tip if anybody else needs to know how to get rust out of a small hole. And that's quite a bit less rust in there. Great, so let's fit the handle. And if you're wondering, it's quite easy to know which way is the bottom. The top is angled on this hammer and the bottom is a lot flatter. Grab the log. That's a bit tighter there around the edge. Great. Let's get the wedge in. Bit of an expensive wedge, but you know, quite fancy. A couple of ridges stopped coming out. Across, and let's tap it in there. Now I prefer to try and get it more or less, you know, aligned. So just making a mark. You know, measure first. Let's try and tap this in without taking out my fingers or the camera. Yep. Might need to put the chisel on here. Probably should have cut this a bit short. Cut that a bit shorter first. Sticking out quite a bit. And yes, I meant a cold chisel, not a wood chisel. Yeah. We'll cut the excess off with a handsaw. Using our earlier log for hammering as a rest. Be careful if you're using a piece of very wet wood like this, so you can leave stains on your handle which you've nicely sanded, which we now have to remove using a scourer probably first, followed by some sandpaper. Trust me, once you put the linseed oil on, it'll become very, very obvious. Touch this little bit here with the sander. Actually contemplating leaving a little bit of this green here just as a, you know, bit of a story of how it was made, or not made correctly by using a green log. But we'll make it subtle. Really have to look to know it's there. This is a bit of cleaning more than anything else now. I just want to, because of working with the steel, hands get dirty. And I just like to take the dust off before I try and oil something. I think otherwise you end up with like a more of a paste than anything else. So a bit of linseed, this is boiled linseed oil. Go into the bottle. It's quite thick. Okay. Now the stock. In this case, the handle starts to come alive. Now, as you can see, we've even got a bit of a shine going on here, catching the light. Here you can see. And that is one very thin coat. In fact, it's not even sticky, so I will add a second coat. And you can also do the end grain. It really likes the linseed oil a lot. That first coat really soaked in very quickly, very well, which is why I'm immediately putting a second coat on. If you're putting linseed oil on, you don't really want to let it dry too much or cure, and then try and put subsequent coats on, because, well, the original coats that have cured stop the newer coats from soaking in. So effectively you're just putting a layer of linseed oil on top of your linseed oil, as opposed to letting it soak into the wood or joining with the original layer. At least that's what I've had explained to me before. You can see those marks I was talking about where it's been turned or going in this direction. Makes kind of an interesting effect. There we are. But it's very smooth. You will not feel that. At least I certainly can't. Go. Final look at it. One thing I've been known to do with steel that I've taken all the rust off is to hit it with a bit of, well, basically car wax. I'm just using some spray wax. Apparently it's got carnauba in it, but yeah, kind of don't put that on my car. Use better wax if I'm going to do that. It's a very thin layer. You can also use beeswax. I have beeswax. I still need to turn that into a protective paste that can be used on steel, which will basically be adding beeswax to some other solvent. There we go. And that is a very thin layer. I can't even feel it. It just feels smooth and slippery. Again, it's a protective coating. It'll wear off if you hit something with this. That wax is gone in an instant. Maybe be aware that your first blow might slide off something if you don't hit it bang on.